Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be addressing two very common issues with GameCube Wavebird wireless controllers. Battery terminal corrosion, since we always leave batteries in these units when we're not using them, and the on-off switch not functioning properly. These are both pretty easy issues to fix, so let's jump into it. First thing is to remove the 8 screws on the back of these controllers to open up the housing. You will need a tri-wing screwdriver for this too. I tossed the broken battery cover since that unfortunately cannot be repaired, but you can buy replacements online for a few bucks each. Carefully remove the back housing once your screws are out to keep the buttons in place. We will clean these up later since we have everything open too. The button pads do tend to stick to the circuit boards, but just peel these off so they can be cleaned with the rest of the other components. Once you have the board out, pay close attention to the right stick since it is not supported by much of anything when removed from the controller. If you pull the thumbsticks off without stabilizing this little board, it could damage these parts. But this is your first good look at how bad the corrosion on the top terminals really is. In the case with this one, as with many of the others I've fixed before, the corrosion tends to be localized to just the ends. This is good since we don't need to worry about cleaning any further in, but we will need to get these removed in just a moment. First, let's remove the lower terminals from the rear housing while we let our soldering iron heat up. I'm using a pair of tweezers to remove this lower set, but anything to push them out from the rear housing will work. Now that my iron is heated up, let's remove the first set. The first set is well connected into the main board, but thankfully they are really easy to get to. Each is only attached with a single soldering point, so let's add a little new solder to each of these locations to get them to flow a little bit easier. I'm going to take off the thumbsticks at this point too, since I don't want to accidentally bump them with the iron. Then just come back with some desoldering ribbon to remove the rest of the solder at the joint. After a little heating and solder removal, these should drop out the back pretty easily. Then clean up the solder locations while doing some general cleaning on the board too. Over time, hand oils and skin flakes will work their way inside your controllers, and this is typically what causes buttons to stop working, or at least not work as well as they once did. So giving the board a good clean while it's out is your best bet to keep it working for a while longer. But as you're cleaning, soak a Q-tip or pour some IPA directly on top of the main on-off switch in the middle of this board. The goal here is to soak this part with a lot of IPA. Then move the switch repeatedly on and off to get the IPA inside of the component. There are small contacts inside of these switches that will get covered with your hand oils, and that needs to be broken up and cleaned out. Just keep adding more IPA as needed and wiggling the switch. If this unit didn't have any battery corrosion, we could test it right after this to see if the switch needed additional cleaning, but since we can't, I'm going to keep doing this process for a while longer, assuming it needs it. With the board clean, let's move on to clean the other parts so we can get this unit working once again. The rear housing needs the corrosion removed from the back though. And you can remove the trigger buttons from the back to soak the whole housing in soap and water, but it's a real pain to put them back in place. It's much easier to just clean it out with a cotton swab instead. For the parts you can't get to, just modify and crush the end of the swab. Now it's flat enough to get into the nooks and crannies and make your housing look that much better in the process. These terminals look pretty nasty, but they should clean up nicely after a good bath of baking soda and vinegar. Drop your parts into a small bowl and make sure that they are spaced apart from each other. Then just add in your chemicals. Let these sit for a few minutes and they should come out much cleaner. I like to use a toothbrush to scrub and get into the cracks of these too. Rinse them in some clean water and dry them off with a paper towel. Some of the outer plating has been eaten off of these contacts by corrosion, but they should still work really well. Just be sure to clean them as best as possible after soaking, and most of the residue should come right off too. Once they've had enough time to dry fully, they can be reinstalled. Just slide them back into each of their slots and solder the ends back in. Check their positions to make sure that they are seated properly too. They should be firm when you're done and not bend or move out of place easily. Now this is an optional step, but I'm going to give the front of the controller and buttons a quick bath to make sure all the old hand grease has been removed completely. I'm using dish soap and water since it works great on greasy, oily parts. Unless your controller is in really bad shape, there's really no need to let it soak for a while either. Just give each of the parts a little scrub down, and once you're done, rinse them with some clean water. Cleaning and reassembling these parts is really easy too. Each part has a different shape, so it's very difficult to put them in the wrong locations. When you add in the purple bumper button, just make sure to have the small metal spring tensioned so it springs back after pressing like this. The thumbsticks can be popped back on at this point, and the board can be slid into place over the buttons of the front housing. You want to put everything together with the front of the controller facing down, since the buttons have less of a chance to move out of position that way. Reinstall the lower battery terminal on the rear housing by sliding it back into place and close up the housing. Once it's closed up, make sure all the buttons feel like they should when you're done too. This is a really good way to check if any of the parts are out of place inside. If it looks and feels like it should, then test it out. This may be a bit overkill for cleaning if you just have a single issue like the on-off switch not working, but it never hurts to keep your collection clean and looking nice for your future gaming sessions. This unit works great now, and I hope this helped you solve another problem with your own collection. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next fix.